Hey there, lovely people. Welcome back to another Writing Tip Tuesday. I'm Sammi, and I'm a writer who likes to help other writers become better writers. This week, I want to talk to you about a book that I feel like I should have read a while ago, considering what I do here. And if you continue on to enjoy this video, please hit the like button. It'll really help me out. But today, I want to talk to you about Reading Like a Writer by Francine Prose. I mentioned this book briefly in my review of Malibu Rising, and I finally finished it. It's taken me a minute, but it was well worth it in my opinion. So I'm going to start off with saying this is going to be a little bit different of a Writing Tip Tuesday. I am going to be doing a bit of a rant and discussing the importance of this book on how I am looking at writing, as well as doing a little bit of a book review on the actual book. So I will be putting in chapters down below so that you can see the part that matters most to you, or watch it all the way through, which I would like the most, but it's up to you. So I'm going to start with a little bit of a rant. From the first chapter of this book, apparently English was taught very differently in the past from how I experienced it throughout my youth and my high school years. If I had been taught English the same way that Francine Prose was taught English, I would probably have been an English major or an English and creative writing major in college. Because the way that I was taught English, probably very similar to the way that you were taught English, is that you don't read for the words on the page. You read for the time that the book took place and how those words on the page suggest an influence of the time and what the author was meaning because they put these things in and what that meant for the time and all of this sort of history stuff that just sort of doesn't relate to the story and what is actually on the page. It's a postmodern way of teaching English. It's what does this say about the time that it was created, not what does this say, which is what reading should be. What does this say? How does it make you feel today? How does this impact you? But no, we teach kids that the importance is the author, not what the author wrote. I hate that. I hate that so much. And the way that Francine Prose was taught English was to look at the words on the page and to see how those words interacted and what they created. And that's how she taught college level close reading courses. I feel like this book is something of a condensed version of a close reading course that she may have taught. She goes through each of the chapters discussing a different aspect of writing and reading and how you read writing. But I despise that I had to learn this from a book, because if I had been taught English this way, I'm not a big history fan. I don't really care. It's not ever been something that has sparked my interest. So by mixing together something that I dislike so much with something that I did enjoy outside of school, because it's fun to read. It is fun to read. It can be fun to read classics. I have never wanted to read them. I've never wanted to, because every time that I have been given a classic, it has been for a class. And when it's for a class, I have to know stuff that I don't want to know, that I don't need to know. Oh, how were the houses set up? What do you call this? This is what they did instead of that. Why? Why do I need to know? Why do I need to care about what the world was like outside of the story when I have the story in front of me? I hated that. So what this book has given me, for one, is a new appreciation for classic novels. I have actually purchased quite a few from Half Price Books in paperback form so I can take some notes and for the things that Francine Prose has pointed out for me to look for in these books, because it is different. It's so different and I want to give them a chance. But I also didn't want to give them a chance and spend a bunch of money on them, so I got the $2 copies. Francine Prose has given me the history of English learning, the modern, before the postmodern way of learning English and studying English, I should say. I learned English because it's my first and only language. Given the opportunity to take a course on close reading, I would do it so fast. I would do it so fast. It's never how to read the words and see what the words are doing. It's always behind it, because that's how we teach literature now. And I despise that. So that concludes my rant, and I am going to talk about the things that I have gathered from the book now, because I don't need to rant as much as I want to, so I'm just not going to, because I'm sure that's not the most interesting part of this video. This book drastically changed my perspective on studying literature. Drastically changed it. And I think that it is probably one of the most universal to writers and people who read to learn about writing, as long as you take it with a grain of salt. I didn't look at it in this perspective, but I read the first review that popped up. That was like a 2-star review or something of this book when I finished it. And they said that she is pretentious and she talks down about modern contemporary books and anything that is like fun and not a classic novel, which she does in a way. She's like, oh yeah, I used to read books for fun. I used to read the fun books. She exclusively uses examples from classic texts. However, I don't think this book was written in a non-scholarly way. And typically, scholarly texts are considered classics. And modern classics don't get to classify in that until a certain period of time because of stuff. I don't know. But I wasn't offended by it. I wasn't offended by her saying that she only reads these things because everybody has a different taste in books. And when you learn to appreciate the classic texts, I'm sure that you'll probably feel a little bit differently about modern texts that don't show the same appreciation to language as classics do, because they have a different language. We speak a different English now than we did then. I can understand preferring them. And I can also say that the things that she teaches in this book don't only apply to classic novels. I know this because while I was reading it, I was reading contemporary books because I prefer contemporary books, and I had no interest in trying to read a classic novel prior to this. So all of what she said is still applicable to modern text. Her section on sentences, I had just finished it when I started reading Malibu Rising, and I was awed by Taylor Jenkins Reid's sentences. They were beautiful, and I never thought to look at them like that prior to reading this book. So as long as you take it with a grain of salt and you don't assume that she is insulting you because you prefer modern novels over classic novels, that doesn't necessarily mean that she has to use modern examples of things that she found in classic texts. So that is the grain of salt that I would want you to read this book with. Also, it takes a while to get through. It is a long book. I took like 3 months to read it all the way through. Yeah, it's been a minute since I started reading this book, and it's been just sort of like a bounce back and forth. I would try to get through a chapter, but each chapter was like a full essay. So they were like, my Kindle said it would take me like an hour to read, but then it ended up taking me like 2 or 3 hours to read because I would stop, and that wouldn't count towards my reading time because I'd be like, yeah, okay, I can understand that. Had to process and learn from it. So it took me a while. And each chapter, each time I finished a chapter, each time I hit an interesting point, it made me more excited to continue reading the books that I was reading to see if I could find these things that I'd never been taught to look for. In the book, she breaks down several different factors of storytelling and how to find them in the stories that you're reading and how to learn from them and to apply that to your writing, which I think is so invaluable. Each chapter focuses in on something specific. So to go through the list of chapters, chapter 1 was close reading, 2 was words, 3 sentences, 4 paragraphs, 5 narration, 6 character, 7 dialogue, 8 details, 9 gesture, 10 learning from Chekhov, which as a former theater major, I know a lot about Chekhov, and I can understand why she would put that in because she had it's a very like personal chapter. I wouldn't necessarily say that she's saying it's required to read Chekhov, but she was expressing a lot of misconceptions she'd had about writing while she was teaching a course, and also simultaneously reading short stories by Chekhov on her way to and from work. And that says to me more so than like, hey, you have to read Chekhov. It's that you can always learn something and that there aren't any rules, because that's pretty much what she was going through. However, she does very adamantly discuss the importance of reading Chekhov in that chapter, but I wouldn't let that deter you from the book. And if you really needed to, you could skip it, because Chekhov is special, to say the least. He's a read. That's a read for sure. And I'm positive that if you were to just read that chapter, you would get the same things that she got from Chekhov's stories from her secondhand experience. You wouldn't necessarily have to experience it, and it's just something you could look out for in your own writing or in books that you are planning to read. And then the final chapter, chapter 11, is Reading for Courage, which I think is a very great way for her to have ended this book. It's really sweet. Honestly, it's not like, oh yeah, you can do it, but it's like you can see that other people are doing it. That's something that kind of battles with imposter syndrome, where it's like, if they can do it, if they did it, I can do it. I just have to put in the same amount of effort. I have to try. I have to do it to be able to do it. And that's a great motivator for some people. And then she concludes with a list of exclusively classic novels that she thinks you should read right now. I don't think you need to read them. I will read a couple of them because I'm interested to see how my mindset has changed, but they are hard to read. I think you can get the same growth from reading really well-written books from the modern era and just thinking about the things that she has taught in that book as well. Because I think that as I was reading each individual section, I was noticing things that she was bringing up in her chapters. I was noticing those things in the books that I was reading. Classic or not, they were all not. Her examples were all classics, so I was noticing them when she was pointing them out to me, but I also noticed them with my own perception and the new knowledge that is placed in my brain from it. I think this book is a great tool for people who are learning how to do self-edits. It doesn't tell you how to do edits, but it tells you what things make certain ways of writing better and a better experience and stuff like that. And I think that could be very beneficial for going through your own writing and editing and looking into it and seeing what you could make stronger or what doesn't add something to your story in a way that is important and helpful. It also helps to figure out more classifiers for why you enjoy the books that you enjoy. Like, I could not figure out why I enjoyed Taylor Jenkins Reid's books so much. I didn't know. I don't like history. I've never been a big historical fiction person. It has to be really good for me to enjoy it. And all of her books are technically historical fiction. It didn't ever occur to me. But given these things to look for in writing, I was able to identify that she has really great sentences. She's got a really great flow to how she writes. Her characters are all very interesting and unique, and they have their strengths and their weaknesses that you are able to see. And I couldn't put my finger on it before reading this book. I have a quote from this book that I felt like was really encapsulating what makes the book important, I would say, because it's different. It's not something that many people would seek out unless they make content on the internet about how they read things from a writer's perspective and they didn't know this book existed and now they feel dumb for not having read it. You know, unless they're that person, they probably wouldn't seek it out. And I think it's very beneficial for a lot of other writers to take a look at. And as long as you don't look at it in a way that's like, oh yeah, they think they're so much better than me because they read classic texts. As long as you don't look at it from that perspective, you can get a lot out of it, and it can really change the way that you read without making it not fun. It just makes it different. So that quote is, "Reading can give you the courage to resist all of the pressures that our culture exerts on you to write in a certain way or to follow a prescribed form. There are no rules." And that's basically what she's saying here. It doesn't have to be a certain thing. You can learn from anywhere and you can learn from anything. As long as you take the time to just do so, you will receive something out of it. But that's all I have for you today. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, leave a like. I would really appreciate it. It'll help the algorithm know that maybe more people would also like this video. And if you are interested in reading like a writer, I highly recommend you get this book. I've got links down in the description. If it's as good for you as it was for me, I think that this could change a lot of our writing for the better and a lot of our editing for the better, for sure. If you don't want to miss a single one of my uploads, please hit the subscribe button and the notification bell beside it. I post story study videos every Saturday and writing tips every Tuesday. So I will see you back here on Saturday.